Now I know the Honda Fit did really well in slalom tests. This car weighs just under 2,500 pounds. I wonder how this would do if you threw a set of like Dunlop Star Specs on it. Welcome back, I'm Tedward, and this is a 2006 Scion XB. Scion is now an extinct brand, but it was a lower arm of Toyota. The XB was Scion's attempt at selling Toyotas to Gen Y, which are now called millennials, but that generation didn't have much money, nor were they interested in Toyota's offering at the time. Most people were buying Camrys, but the people who were buying Camrys were kind of old fuddy-duddies, and for whatever reason, they believed selling these little guys, they'd bring them into the fold. I'll never understand why they thought the youth was going to go and jump on this style. It is charmingly ugly and obviously based on the wear and tear on this one with 189,000 miles, you can tell it's been well used. So it makes a phenomenal first car. Let's take a look under the hood first, because this is powered by a 1.5 liter, 4-cylinder with 108 horsepower. It has variable valve timing on the intake cam, and other than that, it's very basic. But it will last about 300,000 miles with pretty much just oil changes, and that's the point. And inside, they had a ton of cargo space. This one is a doghouse, basically, so it's disgusting, but I think that's probably how most of these look. And when you're back here, you'll notice how high up these seats are, and when we get into drive, you'll notice the seating position is quite high, because I think what they were aiming to do is people who couldn't afford, say, a RAV4 or any of these little SUVs, they wanted that seating position. So even though this is a little car, the seating position is massively high. I am not going to trust these struts. Holy cow, it's just warm enough to work, but I'm not going to risk my head. This is a ton of cargo space, and if you fold down this rear seat, it actually has 2 cubic feet less cargo space than a Ford Explorer. Unbelievably practical. And even though with 108 horsepower, passengers might weigh you down, there's a ton of legroom in here. This is nuts. Look at this. You could genuinely go on a long road trip, have first class seating. Look at that. I mean, I don't know if the suspension's going to take it. We'll find out in a minute. But let's go for a drive and find out what makes these so special, because they sold quite a few of them. In fact, in 2006, they sold about 65,000 of these, and that's when it all went downhill because the redesign just didn't work out. First thing you notice when you jump in is the kind of irregular cabin, especially for a car sold in America back then. This was very novel, very strange. And you've got your speedometer and tachometer in the center, obviously your fuel gauge, and nothing directly in front of you. Over here, we've got our odometer, our gear position, and let's see if we can see that. That is your coolant light. So that's telling you that the car's still warming up, which is actually kind of nice. So you don't get a coolant temp gauge, but you do get the little water temp thing, which you will also notice if you're a Lotus fan, you get the same thing on the Evora GT today in 2021. Now the base price of the car was just over $14,000. But if you added this automatic transmission, this 4-speed auto, you added $800 to that price, which is no small thing, but I think most folks probably option that. I have to take a look at the numbers, but I would assume that was a luxury that most of these people bought. When you set off, the first thing you notice is that it's well insulated. It actually is pretty quiet inside this cabin, and for a 2,500 pound car, yes, 2,500 pounds. The only thing at this point that was 2,500 pounds was the Toyota Celica. My Toyota Celica GTS weighed 2,500 pounds, and so does this. Now, that had 180 horsepower, this has 108. Definitely makes the difference, but it's surprising that it's not blasting me with road noise. It's actually a fairly enjoyable drive. You'll notice our coolant light went out. We can open the taps a little bit. Minor exhaust leak, I would assume, probably from that classic flex pipe that everybody suffers from in Toyota land. This is based on the Echo, so pretty much everything about this is a Toyota Echo, which I don't think that was the hottest seller at the time, but these were so unbelievably practical. Were they sold to kids, though? Was it the demographic they were looking for? I'm not so sure, because to be honest, I don't think I knew anybody my age in that time frame that was buying these cars, but I did know that their parents bought them because they were just great little runabouts for beating on in the winter and around town. You could put a ton of crap in it, you could get your kids to college and back, and you know, you're probably in debt trying to pay for their tuition. So even though it was aimed at the kids in college, I think the parents who were paying the tuition probably ended up being the ones who needed a $14,000 car. Now, I know the Honda Fit did really well in slalom tests. This car weighs just under 2,500 pounds. I wonder how this would do if you threw a set of like Dunlop Star Specs on it and took it to an autocross. I mean, it doesn't have straight line speed, but who cares? It's a momentum car. It's a momentum car. I'm so surprised at just how like agile and enjoyable it is to drive. The steering, while light, it's not like 95 Camry light. It's communicative, it's direct, because there's no funny stuff here. There's no e-pass. I mean, it's a hydraulic system. And there's also not much tire to absorb anything for you. You're on 15-inch wheels, but a 185 section tire. So everything happening, it's not really being absorbed through that rubber. It's just letting you know directly in the palm of your hands. I will say the seating position is very odd, almost uncomfortably high, but you know what? It takes away the tiny car feeling of it, even though, I mean, it's really not that small. We've driven K cars on the channel. Pardon me while I look both ways like 5 times. The side impact crash rating on these XBs, it's not something you want to mess with. You will be injured. Front crash is kind of okay, maybe by 2004 standards, but you don't want to get hit on the side. I'll tell you though, I would like to be rowing that 5-speed. That would probably be preferable to this right now. I'll do the kindness as we test those out. They work really well. There goes my phone. All right. Sometimes you get in like really cheapo cars and the brakes are so sketchy that the thought of going 60 miles an hour is horrifying, because you know that you'll never get it back down in time if there were an emergency. But this actually does a pretty good job. Scion offered these cars as like customizable, and that's what was so strange about it, because they thought they were getting into the psyche of the millennial. They thought they were like, oh, give them choices, let them build their own, and they give you 38 options to choose from, most of which were pretty silly, but 2 options were performance oriented. You get a strut bar across the front for like $250, and you could get a cold air intake, which had no horsepower gain rating. We'll assume, you know, negligible to 10 horsepower. The appearance of this car was just so laughably charming that it was hard to hate on it. Honestly, look, another Scion. There's the XD. Visibility is definitely something to take note of, because there is plenty of it. You're surrounded by glass, which is really nice, especially when you're on the road with things like giant Ford pickup trucks. You don't want to be hit in this vehicle. But I hear a lot about safety in the comment section when I drive cars like this. Yet, when I drive cars like a Caterham 7, everyone says, oh, I would daily it. I would daily it. So I never quite understand the psychology of my viewers when it comes to safety. Because on the one hand, you'll tell me that that is outrageously dangerous. On the other hand, you'll tell me that you would daily... Whoa, green Stinger? Oh my goodness, that was worth talking about. On the other hand, you'll tell me I'd never drive that affordable runabout because it's so dangerous. I hope that cop doesn't pull me over in a Scion XB. That would be quite a shame. The suspension is fairly stiff, but not so stiff that you can't just kind of cruise over road imperfections. Obviously, we've got a bunch of sidewall to play with on these 15-inch wheels. But the nice thing, though, is even at $189,000, this very, very inexpensive car, it's not that rattly and awful. Like, I mean, yeah, sure, you've got a little bit, but nothing more than you'd expect. Honestly, I think my M3 probably makes more noises than... All right, maybe that's not true. But a lot of German cars, a lot of expensive German cars, start to show their wear at 100,000 miles, and this is doing just fine. Scion eventually folded because really the only car they were offering that was of any interest to anybody was the FRS, which eventually got branded as the 86 under Toyota's branding, and you know, that's fine. It didn't sell very well anyway. They only sold like 12,000 a year on a good year. But while they did sell quite a few of these, it never did what the brand intended. Now, remember, it's not just about individual sales. It's about brand loyalty. It's about creating loyalty within the Toyota ecosystem. And the buyers of the Scion XB never went and graduated into the Camry and then eventually into an Avalon and then eventually into a nursing home. They just either stuck with them forever, or they moved to a new brand that was going to offer them something in that price range. And sure, the brand died. And if we compare it against, let's see, Daewoo, who basically brought in a pyramid scheme to sell cars to college students for cheap, they did not succeed. That was a very unsuccessful venture, and they were awful, awful, awful cars. When was the last time you saw a Daewoo? Meanwhile, I see Scion XAs and XBs, the first generations, all over the place. They're everywhere because they last forever. And I just think we need to give credit where credit's due. This is actually a pretty sweet little car for the money, and it's still alive and kicking today, and it's fun to drive. It's fun to drive. Sure, you'll need to get over its appearance. It's maybe not the sexiest thing in the world. It's maybe not the car that a 17 to 22-year-old wants to buy. But we've entered sort of a Radwood culture where charmingly ugly cars are becoming hip. And maybe these on the secondhand market with 200,000 miles and very, very low prices are going to be the future of the Scion XB. So, all that being said, I genuinely have respect for this car. I think I appreciate the little milk truck Scion more than I thought I would. And if I had need for a beater, which I kind of do in the winter, this would be on my list. I mean, it's not exactly the highway cruiser you want to be in, and safety-wise, I think I could do a little better, but it does the trick. So thank you so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Let's avoid this pothole and jump into this corner. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one. Wow, I do not fit in this neighborhood. That looks like it's straight out of an Audi commercial. Toyota tried to capitalize heavily on trends in younger people back then. So number one is they made them highly customizable, because they noticed that everybody with an Econo box was customizing their car, whether they were doing performance upgrades like a cold air intake on their Honda Civic, or they were putting little interior bits and pieces. So they gave their consumers the ability to customize their Scions very specifically to their taste, which I don't know that many people did that, but I mean, you could. There were things you could add. You could have a carbon fiber shift knob if you so chose. And the other thing is they introduced no haggle buying. So when you bought these cars, you'd go in and you'd buy the base car as it sat. There was one trim level for these cars. They cost what the price was. All of the options were installed by the dealer.